My parents used the money I sent them for 7 years to pay for my brother's business. My father said, "He's a man. You'll understand someday." My brother smirked. "Why do you even work so hard?" I said nothing. On his launch day, I announced my own company right next door. "So, you're really doing this?" Martin said, eyeing me from across the cracked pavement, his arms folded tightly over his chest. I smiled faintly. "Already done, Martin." Dad stood beside him, arms crossed, silent but glowering. The same way he always did when things didn't go his way. "You'll understand someday," Dad muttered. "He's a man. It's different for you." Martin just smirked. "Why do you even work so hard, Elise?" I said nothing. I didn't need to. The sign above my new business said it all. Growing up in Boise, Idaho, family wasn't just important, it was everything. Or at least, that's what my parents, Teresa and Raymond, always said. In our small neighborhood where everyone knew everyone else's business, reputation was currency, and loyalty to family was the highest virtue you could have. I believed them. For the longest time, I really did. My brother, Martin, was 2 years younger, and from the moment he could walk, he was Dad's pride and joy. It didn't matter that he scraped through school by the skin of his teeth or that he quit jobs as fast as he got them. Dad called him a builder, an entrepreneur, a man with ambition. Meanwhile, I worked part-time through college, and I moved to Seattle after graduation with nothing but 2 suitcases and a rusted Honda. Seattle was cruel. The first 2 years, I lived in a tiny studio apartment where I could hear my neighbor's dog barking at all hours. I worked 3 jobs, accounting internships during the day, waitressing at night, and freelance gigs on weekends. Every paycheck was carefully divided: rent, groceries, a little for savings, and always $800 wired home to Boise. Mom always sounded so grateful on the phone. "It's just temporary, sweetie," she'd say. "You know how hard things are for us right now." I imagined them struggling to keep the electricity on, to pay off mounting debts. I imagined my little brother working some minimum wage job, barely getting by. I pictured them sacrificing, hurting, scraping just like I was. It was the thought that kept me going some nights, when the exhaustion was so heavy that even my bones hurt. But the calls became less frequent. The texts turned shorter. I chalked it up to them being busy, trying to survive. 7 years. 7 years of missed vacations, of buying second-hand clothes, of saying no to dinners out because sending money home mattered more. Then Naomi, an old friend from Boise, invited me back for her wedding. It would be my first trip home since I left. The moment I pulled into the driveway, I knew something was wrong. The house didn't just look okay, it looked better than ever. Fresh paint, new windows, even a manicured garden that Mom used to say she had no time for. And parked outside was a gleaming new truck, so clean it practically sparkled under the sun. When I stepped inside, the shock deepened. The faded, threadbare couches were gone, replaced by shiny leather sets. The cracked linoleum was now smooth, polished hardwood. A massive flat screen dominated the living room wall. I barely recognized the place. Dad greeted me with a gruff pat on the back and a short, "You're just in time." Mom's eyes were red-rimmed, but she smiled tightly. Martin walked in, wearing a tailored suit that probably cost more than 3 months of my rent, grinning like he owned the world. They sat me down for dinner like it was any normal family meal. Then Martin made his announcement: he was launching a luxury car dealership. Right there in Boise. Grand opening was in 2 months. They cheered. They toasted him. I sat frozen, the words thick in my throat. "Wait," I finally managed to ask, my voice trembling, How did you afford this?" Dad didn't hesitate. He smiled proudly, like it was obvious. "We invested. In Martin. He's got real potential." Martin leaned back in his chair, that damn smirk plastered on his face. "Why do you even work so hard, Elise?" he asked. "You could just ask for help." That was when it all clicked. The money I sent, month after month, year after year, hadn't been for keeping the lights on or putting food on the table. It had been for him. To fund Martin's dream. The betrayal was a living thing, clawing up my throat, burning behind my eyes. But I said nothing. Not then. Not there. I left after dinner, driving away into the dark Boise streets, feeling like the ground had been ripped out from under me. Back in Seattle, I spiraled. At first, I cried myself to sleep. Then I raged. Then I went numb. But eventually, the numbness hardened into something else, resolve. If they thought I would roll over and accept it, they didn't know me at all. I didn't confront them. I didn't argue. I didn't demand they give the money back. Instead, I started planning. Seattle had taught me resilience. It had taught me to scrape and claw and hustle harder than anyone else. I began saving every penny. I networked, pulled favors, built a business plan with meticulous care. If Martin thought he was going to dominate Boise's car market, he had another thing coming. I found an old auto repair shop 2 lots down from where Martin's shiny new dealership was going to open. The owner was desperate to sell. I snapped it up with the money I had left and a modest loan. 4 months, I worked in silence. Renovating, hiring a team, building the kind of business Boise families actually needed: reliable, affordable cars without the BS. And I waited. When Martin's grand opening day arrived, with his balloons and banners and live music, I held my own quieter event next door. No champagne. No flashing lights. Just simple signs that said, Pinecrest Motors, honest cars. Honest prices. Serving Boise families first. I wore jeans and a simple polo shirt, shaking hands with my first customers. And then, as the crowd started thinning on Martin's side, he spotted me. That's when the real confrontation began. Martin stood there, frozen for a second, the fake, confident smile flickering on his face when he saw the modest crowd gathered in front of my dealership. For a moment, he looked like he didn't recognize me. Like in his head, I had always been the background character, the one quietly sacrificing, quietly clapping for his wins. Not someone who would ever stand next to him, let alone compete. I didn't wave. I didn't even smile. I turned and greeted a young couple who had just pulled into my lot, dusty boots and all, looking for a reliable used truck. As I showed them around, I could feel Martin's eyes burning into the back of my neck. The day wore on. His side had more music, louder announcements, but it was clear which lot the people preferred. I wasn't offering champagne glasses and valet parking. I was offering honesty, fair prices, and cars people could actually afford. I caught Dad standing near Martin's booth, arms folded across his chest, that same sour expression he used to reserve for when I brought home good grades instead of big achievements like Martin's football trophies. Mom was there too, fluttering awkwardly between the two businesses, clutching a purse she clearly didn't know what to do with. At one point, she approached me. "Lissy, sweetheart, you really should come over to your brother's event," she said in that overly sweet voice she used whenever she knew she was asking too much. I looked up from filling out a sales form for a young family and simply said, "I'm working, Mom." Her face fell, but she didn't press it. She walked back slowly toward Martin's side, glancing over her shoulder like she half expected me to follow. I didn't. I had spent too many years walking behind them already. The weeks that followed were strange. Martin's dealership got decent foot traffic at first, curiosity, I guess. But luxury cars didn't sell easily in a town where the average household income barely scraped above national average. Meanwhile, Pinecrest Motors thrived. Word spread quickly in Boise when you treated people right. Customers told their cousins, coworkers, church friends. I didn't have a fancy marketing team or a billboard campaign. I had trust. One evening, about a month after the openings, I overheard a conversation at the town coffee shop. 2 men were talking about the snooty place next to the good dealership where the girl actually knows her stuff. I sipped my coffee in silence, a tiny smile curling at the corner of my mouth. But not everyone was happy. Late one Friday, just as we were locking up for the night, Martin showed up. He didn't park in a customer spot. He pulled his fancy imported sedan right up to the front door, engine idling, blocking the entrance. I was inside going over inventory with my floor manager, Theo, when I noticed the headlights cutting across the window. Theo looked at me, eyebrows raised. "Want me to handle it?" I shook my head. "No. I'll talk to him." Outside, the air was thick with that dry summer heat, still clinging even after sunset. Martin leaned against his car, arms crossed, looking every bit the caricature of a man trying to play businessman. "You're really enjoying this, aren't you?" he said, voice low but sharp. I didn't answer right away. I locked the door behind me, keys jangling in my hand. "I'm running a business, Martin," I said calmly. "Same as you. You're trying to humiliate me." "Funny," I said, tilting my head, "that you think this is about you." He pushed off the car, stepping closer, trying to loom over me the way he used to when we were kids, and he wanted to steal the TV remote. "You don't get it, Elise," he said. "Dad's been worried. You're dividing the family." I almost laughed. "The family was divided the moment you decided my hard work was just your startup fund." He flushed red, looking for words that didn't come. For the first time in my life, Martin didn't look so untouchable. He looked lost. "We're supposed to support each other," he muttered. "Support?" I said, voice sharp now. "I did. For 7 years." A long silence stretched between us. The buzzing of a neon sign across the street was the only sound. Finally, he backed off a little, kicking a pebble with his expensive Italian shoe. "I just thought," he started, but didn't finish. And then, without another word, he climbed into his car and peeled out of the lot, tires screeching against the pavement. I watched the taillights disappear into the night, feeling nothing. No victory. No sadness. Just a quiet, steady sense of reclaiming something that had always been mine. Inside, Theo waited with a knowing look. "You okay, boss?" "Yeah," I said, flipping off the last light. "I'm more than okay." But I knew this wasn't over. Martin wasn't the type to walk away quietly. And my parents? They hadn't even started showing their real cards yet. The weekend after Martin's late-night visit, the first real crack appeared. It came in the form of an unexpected Sunday lunch invitation from my parents. I hadn't heard from them directly since the grand opening fiasco, so when the text popped up from Mom, "Come over for lunch. We miss you." I stared at it for a long time before answering. Part of me wanted to ignore it. Pretend I never saw it. But another part, that stubborn part that still wanted to believe in family, answered, "Okay." Noon. When I pulled into the driveway, I noticed immediately how the shine had worn off everything. The flowers Mom once so proudly displayed in the garden were wilting under the late summer sun. The paint on the house, so fresh only a year ago, was already starting to fade. Martin's truck was parked haphazardly in front of the garage, one of the side mirrors cracked. Inside, it was the same house but not. There was an uncomfortable tension clinging to the air, thick like humidity before a storm. Mom met me at the door, pulling me into an awkward hug. Dad barely looked up from his recliner where he sat watching some grainy football rerun. Lunch was awkward. Stilted conversation about the weather, old neighbors, who was getting married, who was having babies. I waited, spooning a few bites of potato salad onto my plate, while Mom twisted her napkin in her lap. Finally, she broke. "Sweetheart, we're worried about you," she said, voice soft. I almost choked on my water. "Worried about me?" I asked, carefully setting my glass down. "Yes," Mom continued, her words gaining speed like a runaway train. This competition between you and your brother. It's tearing the family apart." I leaned back in my chair, folding my arms. Dad still hadn't looked up. Mom rushed on, as if she could fix it by talking fast enough. "Martin's been having a hard time. The market's not what he thought. He's under a lot of pressure. Maybe you could ease up a little? I stared at her. For a long time. Ease up. After 7 years of carrying them silently, after working myself into exhaustion while they built Martin's dream on my back, they wanted me to ease up. Dad finally spoke, his voice low and gruff. It's not right for you to be cutting your brother down like this, Elise. I'm not cutting anyone down, I said quietly. I'm running my business. He's running his. Dad snorted. You know damn well it's different. And there it was. The same unspoken rule that had ruled my childhood. Martin was allowed to succeed. Martin was allowed to struggle. Martin was allowed to be supported, bailed out, celebrated whatever he needed. Me? I was supposed to be the support system. Always. Without complaint. Without asking for anything in return. I put my fork down. Pushed my chair back slowly. If you're asking me to close my business, I said, voice trembling despite every ounce of steel I tried to force into it, the answer is no. No one's saying that, Mom said quickly, glancing nervously at Dad. But Dad didn't deny it. And neither did Martin, who I noticed now, was leaning in the doorway between the kitchen and living room, arms crossed, silent but smirking. He had been listening the whole time. Maybe you should think about what family means, Elise, Dad said, almost like an afterthought. I have, I said, standing. Every day for the past 7 years. I grabbed my purse, heart hammering in my chest, and walked out without looking back. Behind me, I heard Mom call out, please don't do this, Lissy. But I didn't turn around. Not this time. After that Sunday, the silent war really began. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It was little things. Longtime family friends I'd grown up with started favoring Martin's lot instead of mine. Even though everyone in town knew my cars were better priced, my service more reliable. It didn't matter. Loyalty, it turned out, was a powerful thing even when misplaced. One by one, the subtle shifts happened. A supplier I'd been working with suddenly forgot my orders. The local newspaper, where I'd paid for a modest ad, accidentally lost my reservation only to have a big glossy spread for Martin appear the next week. Even the local Chamber of Commerce events, where small businesses usually supported each other, started feeling colder. It didn't take a genius to figure out why. Dad had a lot of old friends in town. Martin still had his shiny boy charm when he wanted to. And I was the girl who had turned on her family. At least, that's how they told it. I learned fast that reputation could shift like sand under your feet. But I didn't close. I didn't slow down. If anything, I worked harder. Longer hours. More outreach. Personal calls to customers. Free oil change programs for single parents and veterans. Anything to prove that Pinecrest Motors wasn't just some revenge project. It was real. It was mine. Still, the weight of it wore on me. Some nights, I would sit in my tiny office at the dealership, staring at the framed photo of me and my parents taken at my college graduation. We all looked so proud. So hopeful. It felt like looking at strangers now. Sometimes Theo would poke his head in, offering a joke or a coffee or both, trying to lift the mood. I appreciated it. I needed it. But I couldn't lie, it hurt. It hurt worse than the initial betrayal. Because now, it wasn't just about money. It was about seeing, clearly, for the first time, that love in my family had always been conditional. Conditional on silence. Conditional on sacrifice. Conditional on putting Martin first. And the day I stopped doing that, the day I chose myself, they stopped choosing me. The months that followed blurred into a strange, heavy rhythm. During the day, I wore the mask of a sharp businesswoman. I shook hands, haggled prices with suppliers, laughed with customers, posed for small promotional ads with smiling families driving off in their first trucks or minivans. At night, when the lights were off and the office locked, I sat alone in the back of the dealership, working through spreadsheets by hand, calculating every cent, every margin, just to make sure I stayed afloat. Boise had never felt smaller. Every grocery store, every gas station, every cafe, it felt like someone was always watching. Some nights, I'd overhear snatches of conversations not meant for my ears. Poor Martin. His sister's ruining him. Elise always was a little cold. Family first, right? The people I'd grown up with, people who had smiled at me from porches and waved from driveways, had turned. Not all of them. But enough. It was a quiet, gnawing kind of isolation. The kind that seeped into your bones. Martin's dealership, despite Dad's backroom lobbying, wasn't doing well. It wasn't just my competition. The economy wasn't kind to luxury dealerships, and Martin, for all his swagger, had no real head for business. He spent too much on appearances, glossy advertising, lavish launch parties, fancy espresso machines in the showroom, but he neglected the basics. Service. Reliability. Honesty. Word got around faster than any newspaper ad ever could. Customers who had been swayed by the fancy showroom quickly realized the service was terrible, the warranties were weak, and the financing deals were predatory. Meanwhile, at Pinecrest Motors, I had built something solid. Not flashy. Not glamorous. But real. The local mechanics started recommending me. Parents sent their kids to me for first cars. Retirees trusted me to find vehicles that wouldn't empty their pensions. I had my little corner of Boise, and it was growing. But the more I succeeded, the more aggressive the undercurrents became. It started small. A rock through one of my windows one night. No note, no witnesses. Then a string of fake bad reviews online, all suspiciously phrased the same way. I didn't have proof, not really. But I knew. And I was pretty sure Martin knew I knew. The worst was a call from the bank one afternoon, a sudden audit of my business loan paperwork, triggered by an anonymous tip that I had falsified documents. I spent 3 days scrambling, pulling every file, meeting with my loan officer, proving every signature, every receipt. The bank found nothing wrong, of course. But the message was clear: someone wanted to scare me. Wanted to rattle me into giving up. I didn't. If anything, it steeled me. But there were nights I lay awake staring at the ceiling, wondering if I was crazy for staying. One rainy Tuesday, a few months into the silent war, Mom showed up at Pinecrest Motors. I saw her through the office window before she even made it to the door. Her umbrella was too small for the downpour, and her hair clung to her cheeks, limp and soaked. For a split second, instinct took over the part of me that still wanted to run out there, wrap her in a towel, make her a hot drink. But I stayed seated. I needed to hear why she was really here. When she stepped inside, dripping and shivering, she didn't even look around. She went straight to my desk. "Please, Elise," she said, voice already breaking. "Please. You have to stop." I stared at her, heart hammering against my ribs. "You have to stop hurting your brother," she whispered. "He's not eating. He's barely sleeping. He's drowning." I swallowed hard. Forced my voice to stay steady. "I'm not hurting Martin, Mom," I said quietly. "I'm running my business. If he's drowning, that's on him." She shook her head, tears spilling down her face. "He can't take it," she said. He's not as strong as you." The words hung in the air between us, awful and raw. Not as strong as me. I wondered if she even realized what she was saying. For years, they had demanded my strength. Drained it. Used it to prop up Martin. And now that I wasn't giving it away anymore, they didn't know what to do. Mom collapsed into the chair across from me, sobbing into her wet jacket. I wanted to reach across the desk. I wanted to hold her. I wanted to erase the look of sheer helplessness from her face. But I didn't. Because for once, I wasn't the one who had broken something. They were. And I wasn't going to keep bleeding to fix it. After Mom left, the dealership felt colder than usual. Theo poked his head in later with a cup of coffee, setting it down gently on my desk. Neither of us spoke. He didn't need to ask what had happened. He knew. Everyone who had been watching knew by now, it wasn't just a business rivalry. It was a slow, painful unraveling of a family that had always been stitched together with uneven, fragile thread. I went home that night to my small, clean apartment downtown, the one I had moved into after the business started doing well. I stood by the window, looking out at the glowing Boise skyline, thinking about all the things they'd never said to me when it mattered. "We're proud of you. You did this all on your own. You're strong. You're capable." Instead, the only thing they seemed able to say now was stop. Stop succeeding. Stop standing up. Stop making it harder for Martin. I watched the city lights flicker in the rain. I realized, in that quiet moment, that no matter what happened next, I couldn't and wouldn't go back to who I was before. And if that meant standing alone? So be it. The weeks after Mom's visit were the hardest. She stopped calling. Dad stopped pretending to tolerate me. And Martin? His dealership teetered on the brink, and the angrier he got, the more reckless his behavior became. By mid-autumn, the cracks were public. Customers complained about Martin's bait-and-switch tactics. A few even sued. Boise wasn't a big town, word traveled fast. It reached banks, vendors, even the Better Business Bureau. Meanwhile, Pinecrest Motors thrived. I wasn't just surviving, I was expanding. I hired 2 more salespeople, launched a basic but clean website, even partnered with a local radio station for ads featuring real customers sharing real stories. Business boomed. But I didn't gloat. I didn't rub it in. That would have been too easy. Too shallow. I wanted something deeper. I wanted freedom. A bank officer, a man named Mr. Lanning, who I'd met months earlier when renegotiating my loan terms, reached out. "Elise heard about your success at Pinecrest Motors. There's a new property opening up next door to your lot, an old warehouse, zoning already approved for expansion. If you're interested, let's talk financing." The property? It was the only thing keeping Martin's dealership from being completely landlocked, the only access road they used for delivery trucks, customer overflow parking, service appointments. Without that back road, his business would suffocate. I stared at the email for a long time. Then I smiled. Not a cruel smile. A quiet one. I moved fast. Met with Mr. Lanning, secured the financing, signed the papers. In less than a month, Pinecrest Motors owned the warehouse and the private road that Martin's entire business depended on. Legally, there was nothing shady. The warehouse had been public property, open to sale. The road access was a private easement, not public. Martin could have bought it himself if he had bothered paying attention. But he hadn't. He never thought he had to. Because he had always assumed someone, Mom, Dad, the world would keep things easy for him. Not this time. The morning after the deal closed, I sent Martin a formal letter through a lawyer. Polite. Professional. Starting in 30 days, Pinecrest Motors would be expanding operations to the adjacent warehouse, and the private road would be closed permanently to non-Pinecrest traffic. Alternatives could be negotiated for a leasing fee and strict terms. It wasn't spite. It was business. The kind of business Martin never bothered learning how to do. The fallout was cruel but not loud. Martin tried to argue. Threaten. Whine. Even offered to work something out between family. The first time in years he even hinted at treating me as an equal. I didn't bend. The bank refused to extend his loans without guaranteed access. Vendors pulled out. Customers disappeared. Within 4 months, Boise Lux Motors closed its doors. Martin quietly sold what inventory he could. The rest was repossessed. My parents? They were furious. They didn't speak to me for a long time. At first, it hurt. But after everything, it also felt like breathing clean air for the first time in my life. I had given everything I had for their approval once. Now I didn't need it. 6 months later, Pinecrest Motors announced its official expansion using the renovated warehouse for service bays, detailing, and a used truck supercenter. I held a small grand opening. No balloons. No champagne. Just free coffee, a bouncy house for kids, and a community barbecue. Hundreds showed up. Old customers. New families. Even a few of the same people who once whispered behind my back. People remember honesty. They remember kindness. And they remember who stuck around when it mattered. A year later, Martin was working at a generic car dealership across town, selling mid-range sedans on commission. Mom and Dad eventually tried to re-establish contact, pretending the whole mess had never happened. Inviting me to dinner, asking about the business, offering tight, brittle smiles like nothing had changed. And maybe for them, it hadn't. But for me, everything had. I set my boundaries clearly. No more loans. No more family guilt trips. No more being second. We saw each other occasionally holidays, birthdays, polite, surface-level gatherings. I smiled. I brought gifts. I laughed at the appropriate moments. But I never, ever let them close enough to hurt me again. Some endings aren't explosive. Some revenge isn't loud or bloody. Sometimes, it's just living better, thriving without needing their permission, their validation, their love on a leash. Sometimes, the real victory is standing where they told you you'd never belong. And knowing deep down you got there by choosing yourself.